What is up, ladies and gentlemen? It's your boy Jonald. Yeah, as you can tell, I just put the camera down, so the framing is really bad. We're gonna have a very funny video this week. But, ow! It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. We gotta be quiet because I procrastinated a little. It's fine, I've been tired and work and whatnot, but, it's like 11:40 on a Tuesday, and this is supposed to come out at 9 on a Wednesday, so I can't be loud. My neighbors don't want me to be loud. But you can be loud as you tell all your friends. That was a terrible segue. I don't know, tell your friends about it if you think it's neat. Been telling my friends, it's kind of cool. Anyway, this week's is my first sequel-esque, you'll understand. But yeah, let's get into the one-off. Ooh, I just hit that. Into the one-off.
Indigo by Jonathan Howe. Read to you by Jonathan Howe. The sword fighter cut through his final opponent with ease, tearing their avatar asunder. A brilliant beam of light streaked up and away to their anchor. Not that they would have been much of a challenge, the sword fighter noted. They're only fodder to wear me down before she shows up. His true opponent hadn't shown her face yet, but the sword fighter knew she'd been here. His informant was never wrong. "Ether off," he commanded. The sword fighter's weapons faded down to a simple pair of handles. He'd taken up dual-wielding in this new world. One weapon was a simple katana base, while the other had some dual functionality as a shield or a sword. This handle looked more like a lollipop. There was a circular, almost crossguard above where his hand rested. "I only picked it because of you," he thought. There was no response. There never was. He worked alone, as to make sure it never happened again. He walked around the destroyed town, trying to be obvious. His opponent would show her face. She would not pass up a chance to beat him. As he stepped into a park circle, a flash of movement caught his eye. The sword fighter tensed and spun, just in time to dodge an arrow shot in his direction. An archer stood next to a tree. Instead of focusing on them, the sword fighter spun quickly. He noted dozens of archers popping up out of the trees. They all wore the same black jacket with garish orange left sleeves. "She's here," the sword fighter thought. As if on cue, one figure rose into the air above the tree line and moved towards him. "You seem lost," she said confidently. "I'm not one for banter," he said plainly. "You know that." She pouted her lower lip. "That's not what I've heard, hero of Cardin," she said. "I hear you were... then a certain someone died." The sword fighter cringed. She was right. "Look, Emily, are you going to fight me or not? I don't care today." "Don't act like the tired hero, Taryn," Emily spat. "You think you knew Darla? You knew nothing. You only took her from us." Taryn sighed. This had been a constant debate. The virtual world had given Emily the perfect place to enact legal revenge. She followed to every game and killed him until it wasn't any fun and he moved. Not that games are much fun anyway, he thought sadly. They'd lost a luster. He returned now like an addict, unhappy but unable to function apart from them. "When will you leave me alone?" Taryn said, voice on the edge of breaking. "What more do you gain from tormenting me? Is this what Darla would have wanted?" "I don't give a damn about any of that," Emily screamed. They stared each other down for a few moments. Finally, her lips quirked into a smile. "And to answer your question, there is one thing I want." Taryn knew. He reached his hand into the jacket pocket and pulled out 2 pieces of dark indigo material. In this game, they looked like indigo glass in the shape of wings. Each had a rounded indent to sit on his ears. Darla's soul looked different in every game, but no matter what game it was in, the item was always with him. It was always broken in 2, but still functioned as a boost to Taryn. "You can't have them," he said calmly, placing the arches over his ears so the wings flared out behind his head. "She left them for me." In this game, indigo ether was special. It was a material that only formed when someone sacrificed themselves for another they loved. The phenomenon had value as well. The game's biometric database recognized someone's face, meaning you could never come back if you died this death. Darla's soul, fittingly, had become shards of indigo ether. Taryn, I'm not asking, Emily said. Her ether was active. It was indigo as well, a rare unique weapon that gave her mechanical style enhancements. She raised a gauntleted hand and the archers pulled back, ether arrows forming in their bows. Give me Darla. Ether on, Taryn said as her hands dropped. Arrows flew, but they found the spot where Taryn had been. He soared on wings of indigo light straight at Emily. She was ready, catching his blade in a gauntleted hand. Taryn yanked it back and wrapped the rings around him as arrows flew. They bounced off of him as he fell. Before hitting the ground, Taryn spread out his wings to catch himself. Changing tactics, he flew at the archers. They tried to avoid him, but Taryn was nothing if not fast. The wings caught throats and archers fell before him. Taryn checked up to see where Emily went. She'd most certainly been trying to flank him. Except I don't see her at all, Taryn noted. He ducked behind a wing as more arrows soared his way. No time, he grumbled, waiting for an opening. When one presented itself, Taryn launched back into killing the archers. They were fodder, yes, but they drained his ether more than it was worth to ignore them. That and one well-placed arrow will still kill me, Taryn thought, as he flashed his indigo wing through another archer. Turning to find more, Taryn was surprised when flashes of light streaked and clasped around his arms. Across the way, some black and orange-clad figures held restraining cannons. Taryn grumbled. Ether off, he whispered. His ether body faded, and in a moment, when his normal virtual body returned, Taryn moved out of the bonds. They should know that I can do this, Taryn thought, stepping towards them. It's a rule of the game. Then he remembered. Taryn whipped his arm up, holding the bulbous handle and screaming, Ether on! As the blast from Emily destroyed his shield and shattered his newly formed ether body. Taryn was forced to drop the transformation as he staggered back. Emily dropped to the ground, an ether bracelet hitting the cobblestones and shattering. Her armor was gone. She used all the ether in an indigo weapon for one blast? Taryn thought frantically. His virtual body had taken substantial damage, putting Taryn in a bad spot. Not to mention, ether took time to regenerate, and he just lost most of his to a single blast demolishing his ether body. Like I said, Emily told him, stalking carefully towards Taryn, I'm not asking. She reached down to her waist and pulled up an ether handle. The indigo glint caught Taryn's eye a moment before she activated the weapon. In a blast of light, she pulled the weapon apart, now holding 2 full swords, each shining with indigo power. Of course you have more, Taryn sighed. He clutched his side in pain. It wasn't real in games, but it still felt real. This could all be over, Emily said, but you won't just give up. She launched at him with a series of rapid blows. Taryn was able to get his singular katana blade up in time to block most of her strikes. 2 still graced his body, once again a body formed of ether. A meter in the corner of his eye told Taryn he only had a minute of ether left. Well then, I guess I have to end this in 59 seconds, he thought. Taryn threw himself into a counterattack. He slashed fast, trying to keep Emily too busy to think. At 15-second mark, yes, Taryn counted in his head, he began to press forward. She wasn't a good sword fighter, so Emily gave him ground. 30 more seconds of pressing had her backed up to a destroyed fountain in the center of the park. Uneven footing, Taryn thought, looking for the most rubble. Noticing some, he drove Emily towards it. At 50 seconds, she stepped on a loose piece and slipped. Taryn rushed in, forcing Emily to block frantically. He breathed hard with the effort, exerting all he could in the final bout. Emily tried to steady herself, but the loose rock slipped and she teetered. Taryn saw an opening and swung for Emily's throat. Her swords came up and collided to block his. A shockwave ripped through the clearing, sending Taryn into a tree 50 feet away. His ether body hit, absorbed the damage, and fizzled out. He dropped to the ground, the pieces of Darla falling off his ears. You know, Emily said, brushing herself off, maybe if you'd fought that hard in Cardin, Darla would still be here. Taryn's fist tightened as he pulled himself over to the indigo wings. Emily strode nonchalantly in his direction. Maybe, if you'd just been better, none of this would have happened. He ignored her words, dragging his body to the pieces of Darla's soul. I loved my sister. Your weakness took her from me. Taryn wanted to argue, but he literally couldn't. It took all his effort to drag himself to the indigo wings. His hand reached out and brushed the tip of one of them. It was warm. Like Darla, Taryn found himself thinking. It was cliché and stupid, but it was what Taryn paid attention to in those last moments. He'd taken a risk in trying to confront Emily, and it had gone horribly wrong. Now he'd lose all of Darla he had left. Tears welled in Taryn's eyes, and he began to sob. Softly at first, and growing in intensity as he cried. Emily paused, clearly unprepared. "Stop that," she hissed. "Stop crying like you know what pain is." Despite the words, Emily's tone wasn't the confidence from earlier. It seemed more like she was trying to convince herself. Taryn reached out, taking both pieces in his hands. He pulled into a fetal position, clutching the wings to his chest as he thought of Darla. Emily stood above him. Taryn closed his eyes. In his hands he felt every detail of the mostly smooth indigo wings. On the inside, however, there were some differences he'd never noticed. Taryn tried to pull back his tears, looking down. From his angle, the two wings seemed like two pieces of a puzzle. He pushed them together, and the warmth in the pieces grew. "What are you doing?" Emily asked above him. She held her hand out to the side, resummoning her blade. They make a crossguard, Taryn realized. He pulled out his handle for the combination sword and shield. The wings slid perfectly into place. Indigo flashed overhead and Taryn rolled. Strength seemed to flow into him from the handle. Emily's blade struck the ground and Taryn staggered up. He reached down, picking up his other handle. "Where'd all this strength come from?" Emily jeered, eyes wide. Taryn held his ether handle before him. "Ether," he said quietly. "On." Power surged from the wings. A blast of energy flew through Emily back as Taryn's body was replaced with an ether body. It was not like the normal bodies of the game. It matched his avatar from Cardin. In his offhand he held Undying Fang, his sword from back then, replacing his normal katana. In his right hand, a beautiful double-bladed sword of indigo rose up. Its crossguard was a pair of flared wings held together by a pair of hands. Taryn didn't feel tired, but instead he felt invigorated. Then, someone stepped up next to him. Taryn didn't need to see who it was. He already knew, but he wanted to. He turned his head slowly, not daring to believe it. Standing next to him, like an indigo ghost, was Darla. She looked over and smiled, waving her indigo mace brightly. Words caught in Taryn's throat. He didn't know what to do. Darla's eyes flashed, and she leapt in front of him. A blast of indigo energy collided with her shield, pushing her into him. Taryn braced to catch her, but she passed through him. The shield didn't, and Taryn caught it unintentionally. "Figures," he whispered. "You still are dead after all." He moved to the side, standing next to Darla. Emily pointed one of her swords at him, her arm shaking. "What have you done?" she yelled. "What is that?" Taryn's eyes flicked to the side, catching Darla's. She mouthed words. No sound came out, but Taryn knew what she said. He jumped forward, bringing his sword down. Emily blocked easy, pushing him back, but Taryn wanted to pull away. In the moment Emily flung him, Ghost Darla swung her mace from the side. The blow took Emily's knee clean out, and she staggered. Taryn swung Undead Fang in his offhand, taking Emily's right hand clean off. She screamed and rolled, trying to avoid his next swing. Darla's mace took her in the shoulder. With a series of coordinated blows, Taryn and Ghost Darla chipped away at Emily's ether body. It was a classic Cardin maneuver, and the words Darla had mouthed. "Hit it till it dies." Emily dropped her ether body, now unprotected as Taryn swung. Surprisingly, Darla's shield blocked his hit. The indigo sword bounced off her shield as Darla wrapped her sister in a hug. It wasn't a true embrace, as she used the shield and mace to hold Emily in place. But Taryn could see the ghost trying. Taryn stood still. Emily looked confused, and then her expression changed. Warmth flared in the indigo sword. "Darla?" she whispered. Taryn watched as the ghost of Darla looked to him, still holding her sister. The pair turned so Emily's neck was exposed. Darla looked to Taryn, confidence in her eyes. He nodded, dropped the undead fang in order to deliver a two-handed strike. Taryn's blade passed through Darla easily, as she was a ghost. There was the slightest bit of resistance as it passed through Emily. Her virtual body disintegrated. Somewhere in the world, Emily was being logged out of this game forever. Taryn slumped forward, strength gone. Darla's shield caught him. It lowered gently, bringing him to his knees. He looked forward, meeting her eye. She stared back. It was all he'd wanted in the 3 previous years, but now that he had it, Taryn felt right again. Darla mouthed something, smiling sadly. "I know," Taryn said, "but this time I get to say goodbye." He choked up a sob. "And I love you, and will you marry me, and I miss you, and all the things I never got to." Taryn broke down, sobbing for the second time. Arms, somehow corporeal, wrapped around him. Darla held Taryn as he cried. Even though he knew it wasn't real and that Darla was dead, it still felt good. When the warmth started to leave him, Taryn looked up. The indigo ghost of Darla was fading. He tried to hold on, but she was intangible again. She met his eyes. They looked at each other for a long moment while Darla faded. Taryn didn't know if it was genuine, but he saw love and sorrow and longing in her gaze. "I love you too," she mouthed. "Thanks," Taryn said with a chagrined smile. "For that and for helping me." Darla laughed. In that moment, he heard her voice, as Darla vanished in a flash of indigo light. Taryn slumped, alone in the park. Finally, thanks to Darla, there was a game free of torment. "I'll have to let Rand know," he said. Taryn flicked his fingers in a motion that triggered the game's menu. He scrolled through the options until he got to the bottom and logged out.
All right, so we're back. I'm out of it right now. I'm just a little tired. I spent all of my brain power on writing this one, and now there's none left for the video part. And then you might be asking, well, if you spent all of your brain power, why isn't it as good as the others? I mean, I don't think it's bad, but you might be thinking, wow, did he spend all of his brain power on writing something that's kind of middle of the pack? No, today was a long day. I've worked a lot. It's really less about the writing and more about the day. Anyway, I did enjoy this. This is actually, I created this one. It was an idea based off a different anime that I appreciated, and I adapted it to fit the character of Taryn, because he really did fit the caricature of the idea I'd had. And again, there is an anime that this is based off of, so you'll understand some of the things. That one's not a game, but I adapted it. Again, I wanted it to fit this world and Taryn, and then I just needed someone who had a reason to be angry at him, and so the story fell into place as I went. Again, I enjoy it like I do always. I love the process, even if everything's not perfect, even if I don't get to iron it out. It's just fun to get some of those creative juices and those ideas. Like, I guarantee you, if I went back and like really read this, I'd have a lot of edits. I'd have a lot of things that I was like, that should be changed. But that's not what this is about. This is about me having fun and writing. And so I enjoyed it. I hope you did. And I hope you can tell your friends and be back next week for another One-Off Wednesday. Anyway, Nike, bye.